They're gonna kill the love of my life.
David!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
Blog Talk Radio.
Hello? Oh, I don't believe this. What is this? Hello, hello? Hello? No, I'm not sure. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead with the show because I'm not sure if we're recording. I guess this is my encounter with the eclipse of Taurus and Scorpio, very Venusian planets, Taurus. Okay, so this is your hostess, Llorraine Neithardt, with Venus Unplugged, the virtual Heartbreak Hotel. And let me see. This is a place where all matters and all concerns of Venus. So this is a place to bring consciousness to the universal principle of Venus within and without. And I really don't know if I am recording or not. So I guess I just have to deal with this. Okay. So let me see what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, or going to explore, sorrow, love and sorrow, those opposites, what's happening. Last week we talked a little bit about the opposites that always have to exist in our life in order for us to be conscious. Wherever there's shadow, there's light. Wherever there's light, there's shadow. Whether there's love, there's sorrow. It's always inherent, and when we're at one extreme, we're experiencing one experience, and then the other comes in, not because life is a terrible thing, but because life is this journey of opposites, and in order for us to experience the power of who we are and our consciousness, we have to experience what are the tasks that Venus asks of us. When we're into we can't help but be psychologically being developed, whether we like it or not, because that is the nature of being alive. So, what is it that the task of Venus is asking for us? Now, when the sorrow comes, it's showing us where we can contain, where we can hold this great sorrow. That's part of the maturing factor. We can suffer deeply without crumbling. It's called a container. It says if we build a strong container, not an ego defense, but a strong container that helps us hold the suffering. Because in holding the suffering, that's the tension of the opposites, we are building a depth, a maturity, and a wisdom. And if we can hold on to that long enough without repressing, feeling the sorrow, feeling the suffering, even though at the moments we get to a brink and we think we're going to lose our mind from the pain, there's something in life that helps us. There's something deep in the psyche that says, no, you will not collapse. You can move through this. Like we talked about last week, you will love again. So the grief and the sorrow that we experience, it's just part of what life is, and sometimes some days are more perfect than others. So I was listening the other day, Sunday, actually, to Toni Morrison on the poet and writer, on evil. And she was talking about that in literature and film, evil gets all the bells and the whistles, and goodness is hardly mentioned and has no special effects. I thought, wow, there's a lot of truth to that. So, of course, I started to notice. And it's like goodness in itself asks for nothing. It's just the nature of what goodness is, okay? And it cannot be manipulated because it wants nothing. So when we're given goodness, we don't want anything back. Now, if you want something back, you're not really living the principle of goodness, that's okay. That's so cool. The only thing is the honesty. Okay, you may not be there. You may not be able to give without a hook. It's not exactly giving in its true principle, but it's giving to the best of your ability. But there's a hook. It would behoove you to tell everybody what the hook is, because otherwise it's going to be a disaster. So we need to learn to listen to our heart. And if the heart is saying, I can give, but I really want this person to love me back, well, that may not work. So we need to let that, be honest about that. You're taking a chance, but better to take a chance and that something may happen than nothing. Okay, I mean, unless there's absolutely red flags all over the place, or that this is inappropriate. All right. So this idea of just observing, how little fanfare goodness gets in the movies and literature. It's all the evil and the soundtracks and the costumes and the vampires and all of this. Great detail done to evil and not a hell of a lot done for goodness. So think about that and think, how is that mirroring in your life? Because love is always mirroring itself. That's Venus's nature, because she's a principle. It's a planet. It's a principle. It's a verb. Venus is something within and something without, all right? So when we're looking at or experiencing love and the opposite is sorrow, is how do we work with our sorrow? How do we bring that? I think part of it is we kind of jump away from it. We want it to go away, or we want somebody else to fix it, or we go into addiction because that's going to take the sorrow away, or we talk to everybody who's breathing about the sorrow, but we don't sit with it. We don't sit and try to understand that this is the task that Venus requires of me, and this is what I must sit with, and not fight it. And we talked a little bit last week, the we, of course, that's the royal we, since I'm the only one here, unless it's the cats, too. My cats, my Egyptian mouse. So to speak of sorrow, like the true sorrow, we can only have one response. We take the pain into our hearts, we accept it, and then we go beyond it. And the question is, how to continue after great anguish. We must not push the pain away from us, but somehow take it in deep inside until it becomes transformed by courage and love. Acceptance and love can turn pain into joyful memory. The healing process becomes the block when we fight acceptance. Okay? So, once again, love and sorrow. One of the ways that we can relate, because Venus is always she always demands a relationship. Please relate, okay? So, true sorrow, we can only have one response. We take the pain into our hearts. The heart can deal with it. The heart is much wiser than you could possibly imagine. because it's connected to divine love, higher love, Neptune. Accept it and go beyond it. The question of how to continue after a great anguish. We must not push the pain away from us, but somehow take it in deep inside until it becomes transformed by courage and love. Acceptance and love can turn pain into joyful memory. The healing process becomes blocked when we fight acceptance. So in many ways, that's the serenity prayer, that we have to be able to accept this, to know the difference when we can affect something and when we can't. And there are times, let's say in a personal relationship, one person knows that the karma is finished, which is really why relationships end. We have served one another. The karma is finished. If we're centered in some way, as painful as that is, it doesn't negate the pain, but we have, there's a platform with which to sit with the pain. And it's kind of knowing, that when we look at this, that fear is a choice. Danger is real. We got to know, whoa, that's dangerous. Tigers jumping out of the closet. Yep, that's real danger. But fear most of the time is choice, okay? And that we need to understand that we have a choice about the suffering. And the choice is to be able to feel it, to be able to watch ourselves, to be able to see the laments and the lies. And the biggest lie is when we're suffering is that we won't be able to survive the suffering. And the truth is we will be able to survive the suffering because psyche is never going to give you anything that you cannot handle. That is not the nature of love. It certainly can feel eclipsed, like next 9 weeks are going to feel eclipsed in some way because whatever it is that we don't know about ourselves, and these are hidden strengths that we don't know we have this hidden strength to contain and to hold these opposites, because that is the nature of consciousness. We catch the opposite, and today we're talking about love and sorrow, and we hold both. We don't choose one over the other. Or we do active imagination, where we have a conversation with love and with sorrow, two different aspects of ourselves. You all know this. So there was something, too. I wanted to go over a couple of secrets. People love secrets, and this is the time of Taurus and Scorpio, which is secrets. But before I do that, on my Venus Unplugged Facebook, I posted a Dove commercial, and it was quite fascinating. It's riveting, as a matter of fact. It really, if commercials were like this, they'd be incredible teachings, okay? So in this commercial, Dove, the soap and natural beauty and all that stuff, they have a forensic artist. There's a curtain, and a woman is behind the curtain, and he's asking her questions about herself. What does she look like? And she explains to him, what her chin, her eyes, as if, the same thing you would do in forensic science, forensic portrait, okay? And he draws her according to her description of herself. Now there's another woman who is told, they're both waiting online, and the second woman is said to just, be friendly with the first woman, okay? Just notice, So he does the drawing of the first woman. The second woman comes in, is behind the curtain, and he draws according to this description. And the question is, what does this other woman look like? And she describes the woman, how she observed this woman. Both drawings are done. Both forensic portraits are done. And then the first woman is brought back to view both portraits. And it's riveting, because she clearly sees how she describes herself is almost opposite to what the other woman described her as. And it's not a pretty sight, because the way she describes herself, it's almost absence of beauty. And the other woman describes her as bright eyes and a lovely smile, and the stranger sees her so much more beautiful. that she sees herself. So tune into the Facebook and look at my Facebook, Venus Unplugged, and view this. It's, and we all do it to some degree, or when you look back at yourself, a picture when you were 16 or 20, and you think, there's nothing wrong with me. What the hell was I crying about? What was I so addicted to perfection about? So it's pretty profound, and it's even more astounding that it's commercial. And even if it's a setup of a commercial, it's a brilliant fucking idea. That's all I can say, okay? So take a look at that. And I'm chatting away here. I still have no idea whether I'm recording, but I shan't give up. I'll do it. Okay, so here's a couple of secrets. So secret number one, when two people meet, the prize always goes to the one with the most self-insight. You will be calmer and more confident and more at ease with the other. So that's one of the rewards of consciousness. So maybe that's what this list is about. So 20 secrets of the rewards of consciousness. Number two, never permit the behavior of other people to tell you how to feel. They're doing passive-aggressive stuff. That's their business. And if we're breathing and we're observing and we've got that sense of love, not sentimental gook, but just really like, wow, this person is so other, we won't get caught up. Don't let them tell you how to feel. Don't let them talk you out of your dreams. So number three, pay little attention to what people say or do. Instead, try to see their innermost motive for speaking and acting. And, of course, apply this very same rule to yourself and become an enlightened person, where you shed light onto the shadow, or the shadow's light, which is a dark light. Well, that's very interesting. I just thought that. The shadow will show itself onto the light of consciousness. It doesn't want to hide if it's accepted. It will only hide because we reject it. Okay. This was a doozy. Number 4 here. Any friendship requiring the submission of your original nature and dignity to another person is all wrong. That's worth repeating. Any friendship requiring the submission of your original nature and dignity to another person is all wrong. Number 5, mystically speaking, there's no difference between you and another person. This is why we cannot hurt another without hurting ourselves, nor help another without helping ourselves. Number 6, when we are free of all unnecessary desires towards other people, we can never be deceived or hurt. That's a good one. 7, you take a giant step towards psychological maturity. And that's what it's about. Psyche's maturing psyche, wisdom. When you refuse to angrily defend yourself against unjust slander. For one thing, resistance disturbs your own peace of mind. And if people want to slander, so be it. You step back. They'll fall in due time. Okay. Number 8, you need to understand others to the exact degree that you really understand yourself. Work for more self-knowledge. And that's a big one. The more you understand yourself, the more you understand psyche, the more you understand the way of the unconscious, which is ruling everything. The more you're going to not get caught up in people's stuff, and the more you're going to be able to love them just for who they are, with no agenda on your part. Number 9, do not be afraid to fully experience everything that happens to you in your human relationships, especially the pains and the disappointments. Do this, and everything becomes clear at last. Number 10, the individual who really knows what it means to love has no anxiety when his love is unseen or rejected. Number 11, if you painfully lose a valuable friend, do not rush out at once for a replacement. Such action prevents you from examining your heartache and breaking free of it. Number 12, do not be afraid to be a nobody in the social world. This is a deeper and richer truth than appears on the surface. Because if we're somebody, then we have to be dancing, and that we're not always in the mood to dance. So by the nobody just means humbly. It's simplicity. You are who you are. Don't have to be a big fish. Okay? If it's not your destiny. Well, you can't be a big fish unless it's your destiny. Number 13, every unpleasant experience with another person is an opportunity to see people as they are, not as we mistakenly idealize them. There's that Neptunian love. The more unpleasant the other person is, the more he can teach you. That's a big one, right? I'm going to repeat that one. Every unpleasant experience with another person is an opportunity to see people as they are, not as we mistakenly idealize them. The more unpleasant the other person is, the more he can teach you. Number 14, you can be so wonderfully free from a sense of injury and injustice that you are surprised when you hear others complain of them. So when we're free of that injury and injustice is when, we're not listening to the ego yakky yak. Well, they should have done this, and I expected that. And when we kind of calm down and go into the heart, we realize those are all expectations. If a person has a habit, that's who they are. Observe it. If it's something that drives you crazy, then don't play in their sandbox. You don't have to dislike them or hurt them. You just disengage. You have that power. You have that choice. You don't need to do that. If love says, be more cat than dog. A cat, if it smells danger or it's not so sure, it's going to disengage. A puppy will go running in and getting into trouble. Okay, so we learn. People are always telling us their truth. We just observe them. Not the truth that they tell you that they have, but the truth of who they are by seeing who they are. And number 15 here is we cannot recognize a virtue in another person that we do not possess in ourselves. That's pretty powerful. If you know what the essence of goodness is, that a person who can just give just for goodness sake, there's no agenda, and you're capable of doing that, it's pretty beautiful. Right? Because as Toni Morris said, goodness doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. It's just the principle. It's in its own self. So if you can't recognize a virtue, so that also means if a person is deeply generous, let's say that's their virtue. If you don't have that virtue, you'll think that they're just stupid and you could take advantage of them. Well, not true. No, they're working the law of hospitality and the law of the divine is what they're doing. And you don't see that as a virtue, but in time that will bite you in the ass to all of us. And number 16, do not mistake desire for love. Desire leaves home in a frantic search for one's gratification after another. Love is at home with itself. That's also the key to loneliness, is being at home with the love that's there. Remember the poem from last week, you will love again the stranger, okay? That has loved you all your life, the one that's in the mirror. Number 17, there are parts of you that want the loving life and parts of you that do not. Place yourself on the side of your positive forces. Do all you can to aid and encourage them. But once again, the positive and then the negative comes in, and you look at that and you observe it and you realize, like, wow, I just met this great person, but that means, I'm not going to have as much free time. How am I going to fit them in my life? Well, that's natural. That's the fear. That's what goes on, and we begin to go into the opposite. Or someone will desire you, and just start thinking about when someone desires you. What do you start thinking? Do you start thinking, oh my God, now's the answer, now I'm whole, now I'm complete, da-da-da? Not true. Okay? Or do you start getting frightened? Like, now what am I going to do? This is a burden. Get in touch with the voices that you usually don't hear. And we can hear them when we start knowing that they're there, because the opposite is inherent in the wholeness. It will always be there. If we calm down and listen a little closer, we will hear its opposite. Remember what Jung says, whatever we don't know about ourselves returns to us as fate. And we go like, how could this possibly happen? It's because on some level, you were unconscious to your behavior or the other person's behavior, just observing. That's what love does. Love loves. And number 18, you have to stop living so timidly from your fixed fears of what others will think of you and what you will think of yourself. Whatever others think of you is none of your business. Because if they're not clear about the opposites within themselves, they're not seeing a clear picture of you, or they're judging you, okay, or you're judging them, okay? Number 19, do not contrive to be a loving person. Work to be a real person. Being real is being loving. Do not contrive to be a loving person. Work to be a real person. Being real is being loving. And 20, the greatest love you could ever offer to another is to transform your inner life that others are attracted to your genuine example of goodness. Well, that's a lifelong task. And not that cerebrally goodness, because sometimes goodness just walks away, or goodness just says, okay, I'm going to leave this little insight and then I'm going to disengage. Or sometimes goodness says, I'm not even going to have an encounter with this person because that's just going to create more karmic binds and bonds, and this person's really unplugged or unchained and or angry. I'm not going to have an encounter. I'm going to step back. So, I guess I was recording. I just got the 90 seconds. Okay, so next week, let's get into the lusty month of May. I'm also going to post the Beltane on the Facebook, what we need to do on Beltane, which is April 30th and May 1st. It's considered May Day, but it's also the feast and of just eros and erotic and union and sexiness and hotness, and feeling great in your body, celebrating all that is alive in your body. So, sorry I started a little late, but let's, that's how the eclipses, I guess, are going to introduce themselves to my life this next 9 weeks. Okay, my beloveds, tune in and write me questions. Bye.
They're gonna kill the love of my life.
Daisy!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide, now playing. Rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.